Okay, hello everybody. In these slides, we're going to look at unemployment. Unemployment is the economic problem that affects people most directly, most painfully, most severely. It's associated with a drop in someone's standard of living, since most adults rely on their labour to generate their income. When unemployment rises, poverty usually also goes up. It's also associated with more stress and lower self-esteem. If unemployment's high, then that's usually evidence that something's wrong with how the economy is operating. And that's why politicians in the campaign trail are always talking about jobs, jobs, jobs. So in these slides, we'll look at ways that unemployment's measured, types of unemployment, impacts unemployment can have on individuals and firms, and trends in the UK unemployment rate. For the Office for National Statistics, they categorise people into one of three groups, either employed, unemployed, or economically inactive. The employed are those who have done work, paid work in the last week. The unemployed are classified as those people who don't have a job, they're part of the adult population, and they've been actively seeking work in the last 4 weeks, and they're ready to start work within the next 2 weeks. The economically inactive are also part of the adult population. They also don't have jobs, but the economically inactive have not been looking for work in the last 4 weeks, or they're unable to start work in the next 2 weeks. So this could include full-time students who are not looking for work, or the disabled or sick, or the discouraged workers, or people who have maybe looking after their family, or maybe have got a new baby. One way we can measure the unemployed is the claimant count. So a claimant is someone who is claiming benefits, and the claimant count is the total number of people who are claiming work. It used to be just those on job seekers allowance. Now it's also those who are claiming universal credit and also seeking work. Some problems with the claimant count are it usually understates the amount of unemployment, because some people can be unemployed but not claim benefits. They might not be eligible for benefits because their savings are too high and that disqualifies them, or because their partner works and earns a certain amount of money, and that can disqualify from being able to get unemployment benefits. Could also be pride, which is some people could be unemployed, but pride stops them going to the job centre to sign on. Or it could be they just don't want the hassle of having to sign on and have to get bossed about by someone who works at the job centre. So for those reasons, the claimant count usually understates the true level of unemployment. A better measure is with the Labour Force Survey. So every month, the Office for National Statistics surveys 40,000 adults in the UK, and it asks them questions confidentially about their employment status, asks them how many hours they've been working, whether or not they've been looking for work, and how intensively they've been looking for work. And from the survey, that gives us the measure of unemployment. So that's the way unemployment's measured in the UK and in Scotland, which is usually a better measure than the claimant count. And the survey tends to show, indeed it pretty much always shows these days, that the unemployment rate is higher than the claimant count. When I look at different types of unemployment, we'll look at three: cyclical, frictional, and structural. Cyclical unemployment happens during the bad part of the business cycle. So the economy goes through periods of growth when incomes are going up, people are spending money, firms are making profits, the stock market's doing well, it's a boom. But the boom doesn't last forever. Sometimes it goes through a down phase when incomes are going down, people are spending less, firms are going bust, and that's called a recession. And during the bad part of the business cycle, unemployment goes up. And the rise in unemployment that happens during the bad part of the business cycle is called cyclical unemployment. As well as cyclical unemployment, another type of unemployment is frictional unemployment. Even during the good part of the business cycle, unemployment never goes all the way down to zero. there's always some unemployment, and that's because people always, for some reason, get separated from their jobs. It could be because they quit, or because they get fired, or they just get fed up working somewhere and they decide to leave. But for whatever reason they become separated from their jobs is, there's usually a time gap between leaving one job and finding another. At least there can be quite often. Maybe if someone gets made redundant from one job, it's going to take them time to search for the next opening. And that time that people engage in search activity, the person said to be frictionally unemployed. And most unemployment is short-term unemployment that only lasts maybe up to a few months at the most, where people are actively searching for work. Frictional unemployment can be influenced by how easy it is to get benefits and the level of benefits. And if it's easier to claim benefits quickly and benefits are on balance higher rather than lower, then chances are people are going to engage in search activity for a longer time. Last type of unemployment we'll look at is structural unemployment. This is about the degree of mismatch between the kind of jobs that employers are offering and the kind of skills that the workers are bringing to the table. So two types of mismatch are spatial mismatch and occupational mismatch. A spatial mismatch or a geographical mismatch happens when the jobs are being created in one area, but the unemployed group live in another area. And a skills mismatch is when employers want one set of skills, but the workers have got a different set of skills. Both a geographical and a skills mismatch happened in the 1980s. In the west coast of Scotland, lots of manufacturing jobs left, and lots of people who formerly worked in manufacturing were unemployed. At the same time, lots of jobs were being created in the southeast and in London, in particular in financial services. This was good for the economy overall, but it wasn't particularly good for an unemployed worker in the west coast of Scotland who had worked in a car plant all his life. He couldn't very easily move to London, which is quite an expensive city to live in, and he didn't have the skills to quickly retrain as a banker in the financial services sector. So both a skills mismatch and a geographical mismatch happened in Scotland in the 1980s, and particularly in the west coast of Scotland, and it developed into an ingrained problem. When I look at the impact unemployment can have on people, we'll look at the impact it can have on individuals and firms. So for individuals, the most obvious financial impact is a loss in earnings, and that means a loss in spending power. It means people might struggle to pay their mortgage or pay their rent. It might mean some people lose their house. To get through a period of unemployment, some people might take on more debt, which could see them through the difficult time of unemployment. But it also means they would have less money to be able to spend in the future, because their future earnings will have to go to repay the debt that they accumulated during the unemployment period. The financial impact will depend on things like savings. If people get a decent level of savings to fall back on, then they may be able to see out a phase of unemployment okay. If they've got a partner who's in a decent income, then that could also soften the blow of losing a job. Whereas if a person hasn't got very good savings, and if they also don't have a partner who's working, then the drop in living standards could be a bit more. As well as having financial impacts, unemployment can also have psychological impacts on people, or non-financial or non-pecuniary impacts. It could lead to more stress, more mental ill health, more pressure on families. Work means a lot to the life of adults. Work's a place where people form relationships, meet people and make friends, and a place where adults socialise. And when you take away work, it also means taking away social contact. And maybe that's one thing we've found out during the lockdown, which is people do need to have that physical interaction with one another and be able to actually be around other people. And when people are unemployed and that's taken away from them, then it can lead to them feeling a bit sad. For businesses, unemployment's usually quite a bad thing. If there's high unemployment, then less people have got money to spend. And if people are spending less, most companies are going to make less profits. And not only are they going to make less profits, chances are quite a lot of them are going to make losses. And if they aren't making losses, they might end up going bust and going out of business. Could also mean if they do manage to get through a high unemployment period, it could mean they have to retrain workers in the future. So training costs might go up. At the same time, there could be some advantages. It might mean that wage claims go down. So it could be cheaper for workers. It could be cheaper for businesses to hire skilled workers. Some business might also gain from it. So Aldi, for example, might be able to gain sales from Morrison, just the same way McGill's bus company might be able to poach customers away from taxi companies. So people might switch to inferior goods and they might see a rise in their profits. Next, we'll look at trends in the unemployment rate. The left-hand side shows the employment rate and the right-hand side graph here shows the unemployment rate. And both these graphs go from August to October 2010 up to August to October 2020. And we can see a broadly positive story for both the UK, which is in the light blue graph, and Scotland, which is in the dark blue graph. We see the employment rate, which is the proportion of adults that have a job, rising from about 70% towards the end of 2010 in Scotland, in the UK, forgive me, all the way up to over 76% for the UK rate by the second half of 2020. So this is a broadly positive story. And the same story is told by the unemployment rate, which is, again, it rises a little bit and up to about 8.5% by 2011 in the UK, almost 9% in Scotland. So that was quite high. This was the after effect of the financial crisis of 2008. But from then onwards, we see the unemployment rate drops, all the way down to, in Scotland, just over 3% by 2018, at the start of 2019. So this is historically very, very low unemployment. We see even now today in Scotland, we see it spikes here due to the lockdown. Then it goes down as we open up again. So the UK unemployment rate just now is about 5%. And the UK unemployment rate is about 5%, and the Scottish unemployment rate is about 4.2%. And both of these are very low unemployment rates overall. I mean, over the scope of history, at least they're relatively low considering we're in the middle of a global pandemic. But then quite a lot of the unemployment has been disguised by the furlough scheme. So there'll be quite a lot of people who are not actually working, but they're being counted as working because their jobs are being protected by the furlough scheme. So the furlough scheme, or the job retention scheme, means the government will pay 80% of someone's wages up to £2,500 a month. And that's designed to keep people in their jobs so that when the economy opens up again, these jobs are still there and they've not disappeared. We can see the impact of people not working so much during the first lockdown with this graph, which goes from June to August 2004 up to June to August 2020. And we see from 2011 onwards, the number of hours worked in the UK goes up, until we get to March 2020. Then all of a sudden we fall off a cliff when the lockdown happens. The number of weekly hours worked in the UK fell by 20% in just a few months during the first lockdown. We see it's gone back up, but that was before we went back into lockdown. This is the number of vacancies in the UK from 2001 up until October 2020. And we can see the number of vacancies from 2011 onwards gradually rising, up to about 750,000 a month. Then all of a sudden it fell to, well, what about 300,000? So the number of vacancies then fell by 58% between February and May. So work became harder to find in the UK because firms have stopped hiring, or lots of firms have stopped hiring because of uncertainty about the future. We also see the claimant count. This goes from January 1971 up until October 2020. So we get to March, and then all of a sudden there's this huge spike in the number of people claiming out of work benefits, which more than doubled in a pretty short period of time. To get back to where we were, to get back to more normal statistics for the labour market, what we need is a vaccination that can allow us to safely reopen and we can get back to a slightly more normal, or a new normal world at least. So to summarise, unemployment is defined as people over 16 who've been looking for work in the last 4 weeks and ready to start in the next 2. The more reliable measure of unemployment is from the Labour Force Survey. Types of unemployment we looked at were frictional, cyclical and structural. It's generally got negative impacts on individuals and firms. And the unemployment rate was falling pretty impressively from 2011 onwards, down to some of the lowest unemployment we'd ever experienced. But since the coronavirus crisis happened and we went into lockdown in March, it's risen up again. So hopefully, maybe by the end of this year, we'll be back to a kind of normal once most people are vaccinated. That's the hope anyway.